Hello and welcome to the review for the Safari Ltd 2019 Spinosaurus. And I specify 2019 because, at least based on some somewhat vague, cryptic new teasers from Safari, it looks like they are going to be releasing another Spinosaurus for 2021, which is kind of crazy. They don't usually remake a species that quickly. It appears to be because of the new material of Spinosaurus's tail specifically. But anyhow, we are here to talk about the older Safari Spinosaurus, already not the newest version, but only from 2019, last year. Of course, as always, if you would like to purchase this or any Safari Ltd figure, you can do so at safariltd.com or at amazon.com/Safari Ltd. And of course, you can use coupon code BIONIC to get 15% off of your order. Now, this figure stirred up a little bit of controversy when it first came out. There are a lot of people out there who are not the biggest fans of this model. And I have to say that even though I was kind of one of those people back when it first came out, now that I've had it in person for a while and it's been out for over a year, it's really grown on me, actually, and I have pretty much mostly positive things to say about it. My first major compliment to this model is just how natural it looks overall. It's the type of figure that I can very easily imagine as a real animal just peacefully going about its environment. It's in a fairly low-key pose, just sort of slowly cruising along through the water, its head cresting up above the waterline, perhaps just sniffing the air or searching for prey. And in general, it just really looks like it could easily fit into a immersive, foggy, swamp-type ecosystem. I think there are several contributors as to why this figure looks so just kind of naturalistic and believable to me. I think a major one, though, is that it is very clearly based off of a specific group of modern animals, that group, of course, being crocodilians. Now, at first, I wasn't the biggest fan of this choice, just because it's somewhat of a paleoart trope at this point to reconstruct the soft tissue of Spinosaurus or its relatives based on modern crocodiles and those sorts of creatures. But I have to say that Safari makes up for it not necessarily being the most original idea by just executing it really, really well. From these massive scoots along the tail to the large armor-like scales along the back of the neck and at the base of the sail, and just really the colors as well. This figure just does a great job capturing the sort of the essence of a lot of those types of animals, crocodiles and alligators and their relatives, of course. In particular, the colors kind of remind me of, I forget the name of it, but there's a specific species of caiman that's coming to mind for me. The colors are one thing that has really grown on me since I first saw this figure. I went back and watched my old reaction video to the initial promotional images for this figure when it was first revealed, and I hated the colors. I was like calling it an eyesore and saying it was like an ugly, boring color scheme. And admittedly, it does look a lot better in person, but even in those original photos, I like the colors through and through now. It's got this very nice, simple palette with these dark, sort of almost black, but I guess they're more of a dark brown or gray sort of color for these patterns, all over top of this lighter sort of tannish orange color, with kind of a darker, more saturated orange coming in near the sail and being blended in there quite nicely. I kind of see where I was coming from with the colors. It's not the most interesting color scheme in the world, but I think it just suits this figure perfectly, and the overall palette is just really visually pleasing. The only real issue I have with the paint job now is just that some of the patterns are a little weird. I like some of them, like the banding on the tail, for instance, but the patterns up on the sail almost look like text or lettering of some sort, and that is a little bit odd. Another good detail with the color scheme is also just the bright green eye and the red on the crest. Particularly the green on the eye is just a really nice, subtle sort of contrast to the rest of the palette. I just really like how that looks. Speaking of detail, that's another thing that has really grown on me with this figure. As you can see, the body is covered in fairly large rectangular scales, and those really bothered me at first, but not so much anymore, to be honest. I do think the figure could be somewhat improved by having a few more areas feature these smaller rounded scales you can see on the face, but as it is, I still really, really like the scalation overall. And some of the larger, more crocodilian armor-like scoots across the back and the tail, like I mentioned earlier, just look really, really nice. They've been sculpted really well. Another aspect of this figure I really like is the head sculpt. It's not perfect, but I think it overall does a really good job capturing the look of a modern, accurate Spinosaurus skull reconstruction. Now, there are a few issues with this figure. Of course, it's not perfect, even though I do like it quite a bit. Actually, I'm going to zoom back in because the first issue I want to talk about has to do with the head. Despite the fact that I overall really like the head sculpt, as I said, it's not perfect, and in particular, the distinctive premaxillary notch in the upper jaw of Spinosaurus has not really been reconstructed perfectly in my opinion. It's just a little underdefined and pushed a little far back. I feel like the notch should be more like up here, and should just be a lot more prominent and really jut inwards quite a bit. Not too big of a deal, still a really good head sculpt overall, and I like the shape of the crest. That's just sort of a minor issue. The bigger issues I have with this figure all have to do with the back half of the body, the tail and the legs. First off, the tail mobility is a little questionable in my opinion. Not outright impossible, like I'm marginally skeptical that this degree of horizontal mobility would be achievable. I don't know much about theropod tail mobility, but I know that in derived tetanurae theropods, which I believe Spinosaurus belongs to that group, the tails were fairly stiff. So again, this is not outright impossible, and I'm not an expert, but this does stick out as being a little bit odd to me. This degree of mobility just seems, like I said, questionable. I also think that the tail's a little bit thin, could just be muscled up a little bit, particularly around the base. I wish the base of the tail was just a little bit thicker and more muscular looking. Now on to the legs. The legs are the thing that everyone complains about with this figure, and I can see why. From a purely visual standpoint, they look a bit odd and stiff. They're sort of just pointing straight back, and yeah, I don't love the way they look. It doesn't bother me nearly as much as it seems to bother other people, but it's still definitely something that I would have changed if I was the one designing this. A lot of people make the joke that it sort of looks like this dinosaur has actually broken its legs and is currently dragging itself across the ground with its arms, and yeah, I can kind of see it. From an objective accuracy standpoint, there is also somewhat of a problem with the legs here. I'm pretty sure this degree of ankle mobility is impossible for most theropods. You can see this leg isn't even perfectly straight at the ankle. The ankle's actually starting to curve like back, like reverse of the way it normally bends. I don't think the legs could quite achieve this position in life unless I'm like very wrong about theropod ankle mobility, but I've heard multiple people point this out, and it doesn't seem to make too much sense to me either. If I were to change one thing about this figure's appearance to make it look better, I would put the legs in a paddling pose like modern waterfowl. I think that would make them look a lot less sort of stiff and awkward, and I think it would also just really tie together the look of the swimming pose on this creature and maybe improve the sort of implied propulsion method and aquadynamics of this reconstruction as well. This figure is designed such that it appears its only method of propulsion is the tail paddling. And while that's not, like, completely unbelievable, I think if the legs were also depicted as contributing to the animal's overall propulsion through the water, that would make the figure look a little more realistic and a little more believable as an animal, and again, just really improve the look of it. So that's pretty much everything I have to say. I'm just gonna quickly bring in the Safari Ltd as usual for a little size comparison, and I'm going to be giving this 2019 Spinosaurus an 8 out of 10. I honestly really like it. I can see why some people don't, and there are still valid problems to have with it, but overall I could only bring myself to knock off 2 points for, you know, various sort of minor anatomical stuff throughout, and some awkward looking posturing on the hind limbs. But that's basically it for this video. I hope that maybe I've turned around some people who have hated on this figure in the past to maybe liking it a bit more, because I think it's a figure that is very much deserving of a lot more praise than it's actually gotten. So that is about it. Again, like I mentioned at the beginning, you can of course get this figure at SafariLtd.com or Amazon.com/SafariLtd, and you can use coupon code BIONIC to get 15% off of whatever you choose to order at either of those places. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you all next time.